Juhyeon from Seoul National University. I'm studying quite recent evolutionary history of humans. So today I will talk about population dynamics between culturally and genetically distinct pastoralists from Mongolia. As you all may know, Mongolia and its surrounding region is covered by a low grassland. So this region is suitable for the pastoralism. The pastoralism was first introduced into the Mongolia during the early Bronze Age, which dates back to around 5,000 years ago. This new way of life led to the rapid population growth in Mongolia, which can be indicated by the increased number of burials built during the late Bronze Age. Archaeologists also found that there were two different kinds of burial traditions or cultures during the late Bronze Age. In western and northern part of the Mongolia, there was a burial tradition called Deer Stone Kirguksul Complex, or DSKC for short. DSKC comprises three features, including deer stones, the stones with the carvings of the shape of the deer, and two different subtypes of the burials called Kirguksul and Saksai. In eastern Mongolia, there was a different kind of culture called figure-shaped burials. These burials are represented by hourglass-like shapes. When you take a closer look at the geographic distribution of these two burials, you can see that they are not that well overlapped. They originated from western and eastern part of the Mongolia, and they expanded toward the north, toward the central part of the Mongolia, but suddenly they stopped their expansion. So the only overlapping region is found in the central Mongolia, which is indicated by yellow here. These two late Bronze Age cultures disappeared as the emergence of the new culture called slab grave during the early Iron Age. This culture is represented by big slab stones on top of the burials, and archaeologically it is known that they are originated from the eastern Mongolia, and they rapidly expanded toward the north and the west. During their expansion, they contacted the preceding DSKC burials in the central Mongolia. So there were three different kinds of burial traditions or cultures found in Mongolia. Despite this cultural diversity, they all share the same subsistence practice, the pastoralism. So they lived in a similar way, but they had a different culture. This raised the question about their interaction. How did pastoralists with different cultures interact with each other? This can be divided into two questions. The first one, how did the late Bronze Age groups, DSKC and figure shape, interacted with each other? And the second one, how did they interacted with the emergence of the new culture called slab grave? To address these questions, we focus on the Central Mongolia, which is a cultural crossroads of this diverse pastoralist. From Central Mongolia, we excavated and generated a genome-wide data of 28 ancient individuals. This study scheme makes our questions more compelling because 28 individuals from Central Mongolia, they share the same subsistence practice, and they also inhabited the same region, and they buried their dead in the similar location. But they had different culture. This is called as clash of civilizations by archaeologists. So we try to understand the interactions between different civilizations during the clash of civilizations. We first started with the first questions about the interaction between two late Bronze Age groups. We first conducted principal component analysis to understand their genetic profiles. In here, The gray dots are modern Eurasians, with the Western Eurasians on the left and the Eastern Asians on the right. And ancient individuals from Mongolia are represented by the colored symbols here. And you can see there are two different genetic clusters without overlap. These two genetic clusters correspond well with two different cultures during the late Bronze Age. When we focus on the new individuals from Central Mongolia, which are represented by colored symbols here, we can still see the two distinct genetic clusters, even though they lived in the same region. So from this, we think DSKC and figure-shaped burials, they rarely intermixed, even though they lived in the same region. To understand their dynamic interaction in more detail, we try to use another analysis which provided better and finer resolution. We analyze the identity by descent. You can see the pedigree of the family here, and the blocks inside the circle and squares are the chromosomes. We get one copy from mom and the other from the dad. And you can see the red segments shared by two individuals at the bottom. They share this red segment at the same position because they have the same common ancestor, their grandmother. So these kind of red segments or shared segments inherited from a common ancestor is called as identity by descent or IBD. Because these segments are broken down by meiosis, by generation, so if we detect a long IBD segments, that strongly support that those two individuals are close genetic relatives. To utilize this information, we first generated IBD blocks for 14 types of different genetic relatives, including parent-child to 4th to 5th degree ancestor. The results are shown here, with the x-axis showing the total length of the IBD blocks and the y-axis showing the number of IBD blocks. And each dot here shows the pair of individuals. And we added the observed value observed from ancient individuals from Mongolia using the black triangles. And among them, we found 3 pairs of individuals sharing over than 100 centimorgan of IBD blocks. This means they are at least 4th to 5th degree relatives. The interesting part here is that they all belong to the same cultural group, DSKC. The more interesting thing is, among these 3 pairs, 2 pairs consist of the individuals from 2 different locations. Those individuals are from the location that are more than 360 kilometers away from each other. That means those pastoralists, they preserved their cultures and their genetic profiles even during the long distance movements. So now we have an answer for the first question. 2 late Bronze Age cultural groups, DSKC and figure-shaped individuals, they didn't intermix or interbreed with each other. They only interacted within their culture. Then let's move on to the next question about the explanation of the slab grave culture. The slab grave culture was first originated in the Eastern Mongolia, and they rapidly spread all over the Mongolia. Archaeologists hypothesize that they replaced the preceding populations, they replaced the preceding people during their spread. We first wanted to take an overview of the genetic profiles of the slab graves, so we put them on top of the PCA plot we just saw. So as you can see here, slab grave individuals are clustered together with the figure-shaped individuals. This means they are genetically indistinguishable. They are identical to the figure-shaped individuals. When we focus on DSKC individuals and slab-grave individuals from Central Mongolia, yes, there was a cultural transition from DSKC and to slab-grave, but we cannot find early Iron Age individual from the DSKC cluster. This absence means DSKC culture and those people disappeared because different people having different culture, the slab-grave, moved to their territory and they were replaced by the slab-grave. Next, we try to understand the relationship between figure-shaped and slab-grave in Central Mongolia. Similarly, there was a cultural transition, but we cannot simply determine whether there was a population replacement or not because they share the same genetic profiles. So there can be a two scenario for the emergence of the new culture in the Central Mongolia. The first one, there was a population replacement, and the second, the population replacement did not occur. Under the first scenario, if there was a population replacement, then the preceding figure-shaped individuals disappeared, so the genetic contribution from figure-shaped to slab-grave in Central Mongolia will be limited. And this is consistent with the archaeological findings. In contrast to this, under the second scenario, if the population replacement did not occur, then that means the same people lived in the same region. They only get the new culture by just getting the idea without the movement of the new people from the other region. So the genetic contribution from the preceding figure shape to succeeding slab-grave will be substantial. This is in contrast to the archaeological findings. So the questions about the population replacement in the Central Mongolia turns into the question of the genetic contribution in Central Mongolia. So as the representatives of the genetic contribution, we used average length of IBD. Specifically, we first calculated the average IBD shared between slab-grave from Central Mongolia and the figure-shaped from Central Mongolia, and compare this with the IBD shared between slab-grave from Central Mongolia and the figure-shaped from Eastern Mongolia by dividing the former by the latter. But we cannot say this value is significantly large or not. We need a value to compare with. So we need a control model or the baseline. We do not know the specific details of the relationship between figure-shaped and the slab-grave, but it is evident that if there was a genetic continuity between slab-grave from Central and figure-shaped from Central, then the average IBD would be enriched than the baseline. So for the baseline, we used slab-grave individuals from other parts of the Mongolia and calculated the similar statistics using those individuals. And we divided the original one by the baseline, and we get the value of 0.559. To test whether this ratio is significantly high or not, we permuted the geographical assignment of the central and the other for 10,000 times, and the observed value is represented by red vertical line here. So among the 10,000 permutations, more than 7,000 permutations showed more level of genetic contribution within the Central Mongolia. That means the genetic contribution we observed from the real data is limited, and there was a population replacement by the slab-grave. To conclude, there are two late Bronze Age groups. They didn't intermix with each other. They only interacted within their group, despite they shared everything, and those pastoralists are replaced by the emergence of the new culture. But we think there is a still missing link. We try to understand the population growth and spread in Mongolia using the cultural data, but we think for future paleoclimate studies in this region will offer a new insight for the driving forces of this interesting pattern. I'd like to thank everyone contributed to my project, and thank you all for listening.